presentation is on the mindfulness of leadership. I think that Christina Marie may have wanted me to talk about the mindlessness of leadership because there's a lot to talk about there, isn't there? We've all worked for that one before. I have 3 short stories for you today. I'm sure we're all familiar with studies and statistics about employee engagement. It's kind of the buzzword now, and it's one of the few buzzwords I've heard in recent years that's a good one. I think it's a really good word worth paying attention to, worth thinking about. There's a lot of factors that go into employee engagement, but certainly we have to look at the relationship between the boss and the employee as being a key to that level of engagement, that sense of engagement that an employee has with their work. Other studies have indicated that the single most telling component that predicts workplace satisfaction and productivity is the quality of the relationship a person has with their immediate supervisor. There's nothing that's more important. Pay, working conditions, career opportunities, nothing trumps the relationship, the simple quality of the relationship between boss and employee. Now, I spent a lot of time observing managers. I was one myself for many years, and then for the last 13 years I've had this Path Forward leadership business. And so I've had a lot of chances to observe leaders in their good places and in their bad places. And the word that I've begun to think of more and more in terms of a leadership quality is that quality of mindfulness. And so I want to explore that for just a few minutes. I could tell you a lot of stories. I was an executive in a Fortune 150 company when I was 37 years old, so you can imagine I made a lot of dumb mistakes. And then Path Forward has offered me an intimate view of the inner workings of organizations and how leaders perform or don't perform in that environment. Now I have 3 stories to tell. They're all true. I was involved in all 3 of these stories. All of them are related to mindfulness in one sense or another in leadership. Now the first is called the Red Light District. Now, don't go there. The Red Light District I'll explain in just a moment. I was in a vice presidential role once where I had 150 employees all working in one large place, one large open floor plan office, one big gigantic room with 150 people in it. And it was mostly the workstation kind of environment where people could see over their cubbies and see broadly across the room throughout the organization. My office was at the end of the building that way, and the front door to the building was over here. And so there were a number of times each day when I needed to walk through the building to get to my office, whether I was coming in the morning, coming back from lunch, coming back from an appointment, bathroom, whatever. I had to take that walk many times. And one morning I came in and I did this. And I walked into my office and I closed the door. Now this was a long time ago and I didn't have a smartphone. If I'd had a smartphone, I probably would have been doing this. Right? I had a lot on my mind. I had a lot to do. I had worked through my to-do list on the drive to work that morning. And I had a lot of things I wanted to get started on. And I was on a mission. So I went in and closed my office door, and a few minutes later, I heard a knock on the door, and it was one of my employees who's still a close friend of mine named Marty. And Marty knocked on my door, and I let her in, and she said, "Jim, do you know what just happened?" And I looked out. I thought maybe something was on fire. Somebody was brandishing a firearm. I didn't know what she was talking about. And she said, "No, don't." She said, "Do you know what just happened?" And I said, "Well, I just walked in. I just walked from the door to my office. She said, "Yeah, you just walked. That's all you did. You didn't say hi. You didn't make eye contact. You didn't pay attention to what was going on in your building." Now, she said, "I work at the far end of the building." And there's a little red light that goes off on people's telephones when they're intercomming, when they're calling inside the building to each other. And she said, the room lit up like a Christmas tree when you walked through the building. I said, really? I just walked through the building. She said, yeah, you just walked through the building. She said, there's people get scared when you do that. People get worried. They start asking themselves, what's wrong? Is there something that Jim's worried about today? Does he have to lay somebody off? Is there bad news? All I was doing was walking to my office. So I learned in that moment that we have to be mindful at all times, even when it doesn't seem important. We have to be mindful at all times of how our demeanor and our connection or lack thereof with the people we work with will impact how they feel about their job. The second story I call the tough guy. I was with a client last year. We were having a management meeting, and I was involved with a deep discussion about strategy, metrics, project plans, initiatives, employee issues, et cetera, et cetera. One of the guys in the room, he was wearing a suit, not a t-shirt, but he did kind of look like this guy. Very tough man, very, very masculine guy. Kind of a no-nonsense person. And we're having this conversation, and we're talking, and we're talking. And I looked over, and this tough guy turned himself away from the table, and he put his hands like this, and he began to sob. Now, this isn't the first time I've heard a tough guy cry, but it's the first time I've ever seen him do it in front of his boss and his boss's boss. He was completely frustrated. His spirit had been broken. He was behind on his work. He wasn't getting help. No one was listening. No one was cooperating. And he was completely and utterly frustrated. And in front of his peers and his boss and his boss's boss, he cried. Now, what's important about that story to me isn't just that he was frustrated, sure. What bothers me about the story is how clueless the other people in the room were about the level of frustration that this person was feeling. Now, if I'm the person's boss's boss, I'm having a conversation after that meeting, and it's not a conversation where I say, boy, Bob's upset. It's a conversation, why didn't you know how upset Bob was? How could you work with somebody day after day and not be mindful enough of what that person's experiencing to know that he was in crisis? Now, Bob would come in every morning and you'd ask him how he was doing. And how would he answer? I'm fine. And the problem is people believed him. And mindful leaders don't operate in superficial ways like that with their employees, because superficiality in relationships leads to lies that are repeated again and again and again without being questioned. The third story is, I'm not buying it. This is a woman named Lisa. This is not Lisa. But this is a woman named Lisa that I worked with about 25 years ago. And Lisa was a very good employee, a very positive employee, a very capable employee, very smart, dedicated, great with customers. But there was something about her that didn't sit right with me. There was something that just didn't seem quite right. And one night I was working late with Lisa, and I said, I'm not buying it. You seem so happy, and you've always got a smile on your face, and I'm seeing something else. I'm seeing that there's something you're hiding. There's something that's painful and out of balance or out of skew for you in your life. Now, if my, HR person was here right now, they might say, maybe you shouldn't have conversations like that with your employees. And I don't know, maybe I shouldn't. If I'm abiding by the letter of the law, maybe I should be careful about trying to be a psychologist on staff. But I cared about her, and it bothered me what was going on with her. Now, I got transferred, promoted to another position in the company, and several months later, I hadn't talked to Lisa for a while. And she called me, and she said, Jim, I've been thinking about what you said that night when we worked late. She said, do you remember? And I said, yeah. And she said, you're the only person that noticed. She said, I was abused as a child, and I hadn't been dealing with it well. I thought I had worked my way through the issue. You saw something that was wrong, and you said something about it. And she said, now I'm getting the help I need to work through that issue. Now, I'm not a psychologist, and yet I was willing to enter into some level of, shocking word, intimacy in my relationship with this person. Now, before we get all funny about the word intimacy, obviously I'm not talking about that in the sexual term, but I think there is an intimacy that a great boss and a great leader has with their people. I think there's a sense of connectedness at a very deep level, psychologically and emotionally, that we have with one another. And I think it's important. And I think we all yearn to work for bosses that can provide that for us and can truly be our friends and our confidants as we move through our careers. People need us as leaders. There's a lot of suffering out there. There's a lot of disengagement. There's a lot of people that work side by side with us who are depressed. I read in recently, after Robin Williams hung himself in his closet, that the rate of depression among men in their 50s is up about 50% over what it was 15 years ago. And nobody's quite sure why. So there's people working with us. There's people whose paths we cross every day who are in crisis, who are deeply saddened and sorrowed and frustrated and dispirited by what's going on in their workplace. And as co-workers, and especially as leaders, we have to notice that. We have to pay mind to that. We have to listen. We have to take care of the people that work with us as best we can. And if we do, there's a much higher chance that they'll engage in their work in a positive way. It's a win-win. It's a win-win. Now, at Path Forward, we say that everybody should have the chance to work for a great boss. And if I say that mindfulness is part of being a great boss, then certainly that requires those bosses to turn off their cell phones and engage with people in a more personal way. It requires us to have conversations that aren't about tactical issues. We have to have conversations that are about us and people, and about our relationships with one another, and about how we feel about that experience of working together. And if we don't have those conversations, we cheat ourselves and we cheat others of a great opportunity to change each other's lives in a positive way. Technology gets in the way. We're more and more connected and more disconnected at the same moment. You're going to be hearing more about that later. So the greatness of a leader comes from many things. We want to work for leaders that are competent people. They're organized people. They get it. They're smart. They're strategic. We also really want to work for bosses who don't see us as economic units of output, who see us as something more than that. And if we do, we're very lucky people. Mindfulness. What a concept. The idea of stopping, of paying attention, getting off the bandwagon, of getting off the rush to perform and achieve and meet goals long enough to take a few minutes to connect with each other in a meaningful way. I have to correct something, and that is that we are not on Cairo. We have been recording our podcast, The Boss Show, at the Cairo Studios for a number of years, and we were recently approached by KOMO and recruited to be part of their weekend radio lineup. So you'll hear The Boss Show on Sundays on KOMO starting in late October. I'm very happy to hear about that. Path Forward Leadership is a firm that helps people learn to lead, and we don't shy away from these issues of connection and mindfulness and spirit as we do that. And it's wonderful work. I'm very pleased to be able to do it, and look forward to any questions you have. Thank you. Somebody?
For questions.
Yes,
I have one.
please.
Why do you think people are afraid of being mindful at work?
One of my stock questions that I ask in our leadership workshops is I ask people, what would people think if they walked by your office and you were pondering the wall or the ceiling or even an article in a newspaper or a magazine, and they are all terrified to be seen doing that. We are so married to the idea of being busy that anything that doesn't look busy is criticized. It's absolutely tragic. Absolutely tragic. And that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of being seen as a person who's not producing right now, right in this moment. And in fact, if they're really pondering the deeper question, they're probably producing far more over the long run. Yes?
I have a question about your leadership services.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, and who would be a good person to take one of your programs?
Path Forward takes groups of 10 people in cohorts through a year-long program called the Path. Yes, we do them in-house, and we do them multiple layers. We have at least 2 and possibly 3 levels of hierarchy in the group. And they go through a year-long program that's based on a concept that we call the Leadership Platform, which we created, which is covered in my book, which is out in the lobby, and which I've left some copies as guests, as gifts for you. And it's a longitudinal program. It's very experiential. Out of a 4-hour, once-a-month program, we spend about 15 or 20 minutes presenting, and the rest of the time leading conversations. And they're some of the best conversations our clients ever have. Thank you for asking. Yes?
What role does mindfulness in leadership has in presentations?
Good question. Yeah. Because I did forget. I was going to come out and thank you in advance for being mindful of me right now while I'm presenting. Yeah, I mean, certainly I would think of it more in terms of facilitation, actually, than presenting. I do a lot more facilitation than I do presenting. Certainly, facilitation is one of the most intensely mindful experiences that you can have if you're doing it well. And if you're presenting, you are rolling with the waves of energy or not that your audience is giving you as well. Now, it's hard to see you in this sort of light, but I think most of you like me, okay? So, yeah, being mindful at all times. When you're interacting with another human being, being mindful is always a good thing. One more question?
When I was working in the software industry, it's about 15 years ago.
Oh, those are terribly mindful people, aren't they? Yeah.
The division leader wanted us to bond with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the bonding occurred was kind of enforced closeness.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt invasive to me. I
Yeah.
didn't like the people that I was working with. I liked the people who worked for me,
Mm-hmm.
but not my peers. It felt like they were people who liked to make fun of people. Not anybody right there, but I just don't like that kind of judgment. I did not really want to know them any better than I.
So the question is, did you not want to get closer to them, or was the way in which that closeness was kind of mandated or arranged for you was uncomfortable?
Definitely, the way it was mandated and arranged was uncomfortable, but also I don't think I really liked them enough that I wanted to know them any better either.
Is it possible to make a meaningful connection with someone we don't particularly like?
That is true, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, they're helpful because, especially for those you like, they'll forgive you.
Those are the easy connections. The people you don't like are the ones that require the real investment. And I think especially if you're a leader, there's always people you're going to be working for you that you don't like. And I think it takes a special character and a special process to reach out to those people and try to create some sort of meaningful connection. A lot of people think this connection comes from talking about last night's ball game or you know, we can really create great connections by working together really, really well and having success together and having shared vision and excitement and fun in the work. It doesn't have to be about our social relationship away from work by any means. In fact, I think that's overstressed by a lot of people. I'm actually quite introverted, and I don't particularly care to spend a lot of time with people outside of work. But at work, I want to be very connected to the people I work with. It's more fun that way. Yeah. Thank you very much. I look forward to, appreciate your questions. Look forward to seeing you later.